You're a creative person, but what do you do when other people don't recognize your talent or your potential? Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and welcome to this episode. You know, I've been a filmmaker and a producer and a media consultant here in Los Angeles since probably 1991. I actually have been in the business since 1972, if you can believe that. So I've seen a lot of rejection over those years, a lot of success, a lot of fun things, but also I've run into a lot of people that simply don't recognize what we do. Particularly here in Hollywood, we launched Cooke Pictures, our consulting and production company, in 1991. And over those years, we've worked with studios and networks and TV stations and clients of all kinds, and very often you run into people that simply don't recognize what you bring to the table. So if you're a creative person, I want to talk a little bit today about how you respond. What do you do when you run into people that simply don't get it? They don't see your talent, that don't see your potential, that criticize what you're doing. I remember early in my career, I worked with an organization where the boss just didn't like my ideas. The more I'd throw out, the more he hated them. Finally, I got fired. I got fired because essentially he didn't like my ideas. But it wasn't long before I found out, once I was on the street, other organizations like that were scarfing those ideas up. They thought they were valuable, and they were willing to pay me to come and make those ideas happen for them. And some of them were huge. So there's times when you should recognize criticism. There's times when you should change because of it. But probably more often, there's times when you need to understand how to move past it, how to navigate a world where not everybody's going to believe in your talent, not everybody's going to see your potential, not everybody's going to understand how creative you are. So the question becomes, what do we do? How do we deal with it? Sadly, probably since the beginning of time, this has been a problem. In fact, I found some interesting stories I wanted to share with you. I mean, Walt Disney was fired from the Kansas City Star newspaper early in his career because his editor felt he lacked, and this is a quote, he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. That's Walt Disney, folks. Oprah Winfrey was publicly humiliated and fired from her job in TV as a reporter in Baltimore because she got too emotionally invested in her stories. The very thing that launched her career later, she was fired for at the start of that career. Director Steven Spielberg, think about that, probably the most successful director in Hollywood, was actually rejected by the cinema school at the University of Southern California multiple times. Fred Astaire, in one of his first screen tests, this is a classic, in one of Fred Astaire, the great dancer's first screen tests, an executive wrote, "Can't sing, can't act, slightly balding, can dance a little." That was his evaluation. Harrison Ford, in one of his first small movie roles, a studio executive actually pulled him aside and said he'd never be a success in the movie business. Never be a success. And one of my favorites, I don't want to drag this on, but one of my favorites is novelist Saul Bellow. A college professor in English, in the English department, said he showed no signs of literary greatness and ultimately dismissed him as a dud. His college professor in the English department dismissed his writing and his skill as a dud. But Bellow went on to win the Pulitzer Prize, the Nobel Prize for Literature, a Guggenheim, the National Medal of Arts. He's the only writer to win a National Book Award for Fiction 3 separate times and received the National Book Foundation's Medal for a distinguished contribution to American letters. Here's the deal. These are some of the most talented people of the last 100 years. And yet they ran into people who didn't recognize their creativity and didn't see their potential. So what do you do? What do you do? So if you got a pencil and paper, you should really write this down. I think this is so important. In fact, you'll never catch me without my iPhone, my iPad, a literal notebook and pen, because whenever I hear great ideas like that, I not only want to write them down, I want to go back and reflect on them. So here's a teaching moment. So think in terms of having this down on paper. There's research out there that indicates when you write something down, physically write it down versus typing it, you actually remember it a lot longer. It makes a much deeper impression in your psyche. So start thinking about taking notes if you possibly can. You may be working out while you listen to this. You may be at the office. You may be in the car. But if you can take notes, you should. Or later, replay this and review it, because here's some real key things that you need to understand when you encounter those people as a creative person who don't recognize your potential. Number one, this will shock you, I always consider it. I always consider it. I mean, think about it. You never know. We all have a blind spot when it comes to our creativity. We all have a blind spot when it comes to our skill and our talent. So I don't overdo it. I don't get depressed and really sit there and tell myself how terrible I am. But when somebody criticizes my work or criticizes me, I stop for a minute. I pause and think about it. reflect on it. Maybe they see something that I don't. I'll tell you, I've done an episode on self-awareness, and I'd encourage you to go check that out because that has a lot to do with this moment of self-reflection. When people criticize you, think about it because you never know. The criticism could make you better. The criticism could make you better. So then the question becomes, how do I know? How do I know if this is legit or not? Well, number one, keep in mind, first, it'll come to you. Very often somebody will criticize something in my work and I'll think, duh, I should have seen that. I should have caught it. It's obvious. Other times I'm not so sure. So when I'm not so sure, the second thing I do is take what I call the credibility test. The question is this critic somebody who knows me intimately, someone who cares about me? Is it a confidant? Is it a mentor? Is it a professional peer? Or is this just some casual person I know or someone at the office, someone I meet at a conference, somebody I meet online or through social media? The credibility test matters because if it's somebody that knows me, that cares about me, that wants me to succeed, I take it really seriously. Really, really seriously. And I'll often sit down with that person or try to if I can and talk about it, discuss it. What did they see that I missed? If that's a person that I really respect and admire, I do some serious soul searching. And I want to look at what that issue was. Now, it doesn't mean I take it to heart. It doesn't mean I change. Maybe I had a vision that even they didn't recognize. Even people that love me and care about me and want me to grow, maybe they misunderstood. Maybe they didn't see. So I still may move forward and not make the change, but more often I'm likely to make the change if it's somebody I respect, who admire, who has expertise and authority in this area. But if no, 99% of the time I'll just discount it and move on. 99% of the time, if someone just comes up to me at a conference that I don't know if he cares about me or not and just says, I didn't like that, or I don't think you're any good at that. I've actually had people call me and tell me that they didn't respect me at all. They said, what have you done? You've done nothing. Well, they didn't know much about my career. They didn't take the time to see what I've produced or what I've created over the years. Criticism from them means nothing to me. Absolutely nothing. So the credibility test means check and see if it's somebody you respect and admire, then you take it seriously. You still may not change, but take it seriously. And if it's not somebody you respect or admire, if it's just a casual acquaintance or it could be just some critic, I move on. I dismiss it. Now, the third thing that I think is really important is don't be afraid to immediately dismiss online trolls, coworkers who speak without any knowledge of the situation, social media critics, people like that, just dismiss them. And by the way, this is a good moment to talk about blocking. Feel free to block people. Mute them on Instagram if you want to, or block them on Twitter, Facebook, cut them out. You can hide their comments on Facebook. They still think they see it, so they still think they made that comment and you're listening to it, but you don't see it anymore and nobody else does. Those kind of things are important. I'll tell you why. If you're constantly taking in a barrage of criticism, if you're constantly seeing trolls and critics coming against you, it's going to have an impact on your work. It's going to have an impact on your work. There's no question about it. So that's why I say if you're a creative person and you're starting to get hit by trolls or critics or jerks, don't be afraid to cut them out. Just block them, disregard them, unfollow them, whatever it takes to do it. Do it because nobody is going to survive a constant barrage. I really believe that as a creative person, one of the things you need to do is surround yourself with people that believe in you. Now here's the thing. You don't want to have yes men, particularly if you're a leader. If you're a leader and you have a staff or a team around you, you never want to have yes men. You want to have people that will tell you the truth. Now, they need to do it in a gracious way. Never be jerks, but you need to hear the truth about things. But at the same time, they can be encouraging. I'll tell you, if you really love someone, if you want to see them grow, if you want to see them do well, you can tell them hard truths and yet do it in a gracious way. I saw a quote the other day that said, truth is not mean, truth is not nice, truth is just facts, truth is just truth. But the way you deliver it can tilt it, can change it, can taint it. So I think that when you criticize somebody, put yourself in their shoes, and when you criticize somebody, always do it in a gracious, positive, confidence-building, motivational way. So the big thing here, number 3, is just don't let online trolls and critics get you down. Absolutely. And here's the other thing. Don't engage. I don't want to do a segment here on social media, but I think this is so important for creative people to understand. A good example is I got a critic the other day. Somebody went on my Twitter feed, and they had something really nasty to say about some comment that I made. And I looked and I realized they had 7 followers. It's probably their family is the only people that are following them. So I realized if I respond to them, suddenly all of my followers will see this guy's Twitter handle. So why should I even make this guy famous by responding to him? So I'm going to ignore him, which will make him more angry, no question about it. But I could block him if it gets really ugly. He uses profanity or just, violent type of language. I block him in a second. In fact, you'll even see on my blog under the comment section, if you use profanity or you go off topic, I will delete it. I want people to stay focused. So just thoughts about critics. You're going to get them. If you're going to do something important and significant in your creative life, you're going to get trolls, you're going to get critics, you're going to get people that don't recognize your potential. On social media, don't be afraid to block them, don't be afraid to delete them, don't be afraid to unfollow them, don't be afraid to ignore them. It's incredibly important. And finally, when you meet people who don't recognize your potential or don't see your talent, just buck up. Buck up. I wrote down a quote the other day by Michael Jordan, which I really love. Michael said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my basketball career. I've lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I've been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I have failed over and over and over in my life, and that is why I succeed." Here's the deal. If you're a creative person, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss the bar. You're going to make movies that don't have a big box office. You're going to do logo designs that don't work. You're going to do things that the client doesn't like. The important thing is, don't go to extremes either way. Don't be on such a high horse that you just assume everybody else is an idiot and whatever you want to do is the truth. Whatever you want to do is awesome. That's as bad as on the other end where you suddenly get depressed and despondent and start self-loathing and your self-esteem crashes. Both extremes are bad. Don't take criticism so hard you just think, well, I'm just going to give up. I talked to a guy the other day by email, and he was asking some questions about his career, and he'd had frustrations, and he'd really struggled. And he said, maybe I should just move back to Des Moines and just drop this idea of coming to Hollywood and trying to be a success. And I said, well, hold on a second. That's an extreme. You don't need to go to the extreme. Maybe at some point you make the decision to go back to Des Moines, but for now, let's try some other strategies. So first of all, don't get so high on your horse that you think everybody else is an idiot, no matter what they say. And number 2, don't get so upset that you decide to quit. Think about these 4 things, and let me review them. Consider it. Number 1, consider it. Maybe the criticism is good. Maybe the criticism is right on. Maybe people saw something that you didn't see. Be willing to accept it. Be willing to at least reflect on it and look at it and see if there's something you completely missed. You have no idea how hard that was for me to learn. Early in my career, I would produce things that, in fact, let me give you an idea. Very early in my career, I got a call from Marty Krofft. Remember the production team of Sid and Marty Krofft? They were super famous back in the day doing children's programs. And they produced the Barbara Mandrell Show back in years and years, decades ago almost now. And they owned primetime during their day. And I was very young. And Marty called me to come out and produce some promotion, marketing tools, some TV commercials, and some stuff that would help launch some of the shows that he was doing. So I came to Hollywood. I was living in Oklahoma at the time. And flew out here, went past his 14 secretaries over at Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, and walked into his office, and I had written 4 scripts for him to look at. And I put the scripts on the table, on his desk. He looked at them, he read them over. It was really funny. He read the scripts, he put them down, looked at me and said, "This is crap." Although he didn't say crap, he said the S word. He was hardcore. And he said, he repeated it. And he said, "This is the worst stuff I've ever seen. This is terrible, really terrible." And I was just horrified. And there was a long pause, and he said, "But I've heard about you. I've heard about you, and I've heard you're better than this." He said, "Tell you what, there's a conference room at the end of the hall. I'm going to go record a session with, it may have been Barbara Mandrell or somebody at the time." He said, "I'm going to do a recording session with them. I'm going to be gone an hour. You go to the end of the hall. The ladies outside will get you whatever you need, pencils, pens, typewriter, whatever, sandwiches. But when I come back in an hour, I want to see better scripts." And I went back to that conference room, and I thought about just getting on the plane and going back home. But I looked at the scripts, and I started to see things that maybe I hadn't seen before. And I did a complete rewrite of all 4 of those scripts in that hour. And he came back. I walked back down to his office. I set him down. He read them. He looked at me and said, "Now this is what I'm talking about. This is what we can use." And that was a huge revelation for me. Just because I considered it, went back to the drawing board, wrote it. I didn't get mad at Marty. I figured he's done this for a long career and was super successful. Maybe he's seeing something that I didn't see, and guess what? He did. And we did the spots, we produced them, they came out great, they aired on primetime TV, it worked out super, and I was friends with Marty for a very long time, and it was a terrific relationship. But the truth is, I considered it. So number one, when you meet somebody that doesn't realize your potential, doesn't see what you see, consider it. You never know what could happen. Number two, use the credibility test. Think of who they are. In that situation, it was Marty Krofft. He owned primetime TV back in the day. I'm going to listen. You know, if it's Mark Burnett today, I'm going to listen. If it's somebody huge in the advertising world or in the movie world, I'm going to listen. One of my close friends, Ralph Winter, produced X-Men, Planet of the Apes, The Promise, Star Trek, tons of movies. You know, when Ralph says something to me, I listen. When he criticizes me, I listen. However, if it's somebody else that I don't know, doesn't care about me, or who is just piping off, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to walk away. Number three, online trolls, online critics. Dismiss them. Don't be afraid to block them. Don't be afraid to delete them or not pay attention. Understand their role in your life. Credibility matters. That's the credibility test. And then the final thing is buck up. Be tough. You're going to fail. You're going to fail. Trust me. If you're going to, you know, the only time you're not going to fail is if you're not pushing the envelope, if you're not stretching, if you're not reaching out, if you're not expanding your tent poles, as the Bible says, if you're not trying new things. But if you are, you're going to fail. You're going to hit the wall. You're going to do dumb things. You're going to do, write things you didn't mean to write. You're going to design things that you didn't see that. So buck up. Be tough. Be tough. Be able to go back to the drawing board. Be able to go back. Do it again and again and again. Here's the deal. Just because people don't recognize your talent doesn't mean you don't have it. Just because people criticize your work doesn't mean there's not great potential there. How you respond to it is what matters. It's not really the critic that counts. It's how you respond to the critic that matters. And remember, more often than not, people are watching. People are watching. So how you respond not only will impact the work you do, but it could encourage other people in your office. It could encourage or motivate other people on your team. So that's the lesson for today. Just to understand that just because other people don't recognize your talent or your potential doesn't mean it's time to give up. Run it through these filters, run it through these tests, and then you'll have a better sense of understanding, is this right? Should I make some changes? Is it a mix between the two? What's wrong here? And you can identify it and do something that'll actually impact the world, because ultimately that's our goal. Our goal isn't to be famous. Our goal is to do work that changes people's lives. And when that's at stake, I'm telling you, I'm open to any new ideas that'll take me from where I am to where I want to be. So, this is Phil Cooke. Remember, come check me out on my blog at philcooke.com, Philcooke. Love to talk to you there. I'm wrestling with these issues of faith, media, and culture every day. This is the kind of stuff I talk about on my blog, and I'd love for you to check it out there because, you know what? I love these kind of conversations. I thrive on helping creative people lead other creative people and get to the next level with their own work.